Today you'll find out mind-blowing facts about ants, and I bet you've never heard at least 5 of them. Some ants act like tiny farmers. They take care of a small insects called aphids, keeping them safe from other predators and milking them for a sweet liquid called honeydew. The sting of the bullet ant causes pain similar to being shot. It's one of the most painful stings known, lasting up to 24 hours. Some Polyrachi species line nests with spider silk harvested from captured spiders. I'm really curious how this is happening. Some ants are holding spiders' legs, while others just pulling silk out of his butt. Holding, boys! When pheromone noise becomes too strong, ants ignore trails and explore a new one, a natural system reset mechanism. This noise-sign balance maintains exploration and prevents the colony from getting stuck in suboptimal routines, the principle behind stochastic optimization. These cordyceps can infect these ants and grow inside the body. They manipulate the host to bite a leaf vein at exactly the right height and humidity before killing it and sprouting a spore stalk. Some ants use pedometer-like navigation, counting steps to find their way back home. How do we know that? So, ants were trained to walk a specific distance from the nest to a feeder. Once the ants found the food, they were captured and divided into 3 groups before being released to go home. In the first group, a tiny pig bristle was glued to the bottom of their legs, making their legs longer. In the second group, a small portion of their legs were carefully clipped, making their legs unnaturally short. And the third group was released without any modifications. So the group with shorter legs meant more steps were required to cover the same distance. The ants, counting a normal number of steps, believed they had traveled the full distance and stopped prematurely. The ants with longer legs meant fewer steps were required. The ants, counting a normal number of steps, traveled further than the correct distance and overshot the nest. When these ants were allowed to run a second time on their modified legs, they adjusted their step counting to match the true distance to the nest. Yellow crazy ants form super colonies with multiple queens, overwhelming ecosystems. These ants caused ecological collapse on Christmas Island by killing tens of millions of red land crabs. Ants have 2 stomachs. One is for their own food and the other, called the social stomach, is for keeping food to share with other ants by mouth-to-mouth feeding. An ant can close its spiracles, it's an external respiratory opening, to stop water or chemical from entering its body, allowing it to survive underwater or in low oxygen environments for up to 24 hours. Allomerous decimarticulators build booby trap tunnels lined with fungus fibers to ambush prey walking over them. So insects put their legs in these holes and ants are holding them and the insects can't escape. They are trying.
Bring on the Flugelkampfheimler!
The Dracula ant has the fastest bite of any animal. Its jaw snapshot at 90 meters per second. For you, my American friend, that's over 200 miles per hour. In an ant's life, who you become is determined by your nutrition, but this ant shows genetic caste determination. Whether a larvae becomes queen or worker is partially decided by its genotype, not just nutrition. Turtle ants use their oversized heads as a living shield to block nest entrances. Carpenter ant can survive complete freezing by producing cryoprotectants that prevent ice crystal from damaging their cells. When the tide comes in, loose soil particles from the nest entrances of ant named Polyrachis sokolova collapses and form a temporary seal, preventing water from flooding the galleries. These sealed galleries created air-filled chambers where the ants, larvae and pupae can survive during high tide. These ants infiltrate fungus-growing colonies and secrete a chemical peace treaty compound that stop host aggression. This ant acts as a social parasite, coexisting peacefully inside the colonies while stealing food. But the most remarkable behavior occurs when a serious external threat, such as raiding column of rival ants, attacks the nest. In response, the parasite workers release a massive, rapid burst of venom compounds, often directed at the raiders. This sudden high concentration crosses a chemical threshold that affects both species in opposite ways. For the leafcutter ants, the high dose overwhelmed the host's alarm system, causing confusion and paralysis, forcing them to stand down. For the parasite workers, this same concentration acts as a powerful super stimulus, a sudden alarm pheromone that instantly triggers a coordinated, full-scale, aggressive defensive response. This allows parasite workers to take the lead in defending the nest, a role for which they are better suited due to their potent venom. Certain butterfly caterpillars, like the blues and hairstreaks, have a special friendship with ants too. They give ants honeydew to eat, and in return, the ants protect them from danger. These ants' queens can store enough sperm from a single mating to fertilize millions of eggs across their 30-year lifespan. Certain ants vaccinate their colonies. When an ant is contaminated with fungal spores, nestmates will engage in intense allogrooming, that's mutual cleaning. In the process of cleaning, the grooming ant inevitably ingests a very small, non-lethal dose of the fungal spores. This low-level exposure is enough to activate and prime the grooming ant's innate immune system. Studies have shown that ants exposed to a low dose of spores have a much higher survival rate against the ants who weren't exposed. Turtle ants can parachute or glide to land safely back on their tree trunk if they fall from the canopy. These ants' guards even use team grappling, pinning intruders by legs while other bites. Odontomachus bauri can close its jaw with a force 300 times its body weight, like a human beating hard enough to lift a car. These ants' colonies may have multiple petri lines. Each male's offsprings specialize in certain tasks, increasing efficiency. Serapachus biroi workers synchronize egg-laying and raiding cycles like clockwork, feeding the larva exclusively on captured brood of other ants. Cataglyphis fortis uses the sun polarization pattern as a compass to navigate barren deserts where scent trails vanish instantly. When the two ant species share territory, they can eavesdrop on each other's chemical cues, a kind of espionage. Some rainforest trees depend completely on ants for protection. For example, acacia tree give food and shelter to a type of ant that defends them from animals and vines. When infected by pathogens, these ants perform social distancing, leaving the nest to die alone and protect their sisters. This fact needed to be told to people in 2019. Caribara atoma is one of the smallest ants on Earth, measuring only 0.8 millimeters long, smaller than many single-celled protists under a microscope. The largest known worker ant, Dinaponera gigantea, reaches 3.3 centimeters in length. The biggest known ant lived in Eocene, reaching 6 centimeters in length. The only 6 centimeters in the world that your girlfriend thinks are big. With a wingspan of 15 centimeters, a dragonfly-sized ant. Giganteops destructor has huge compound eyes and hunts visually like a jumping spider. The primary acoustic signals in ants, such as stridulation, rubbing body parts together, are transmitted as vibration through the solid substrate and tunnel walls.
Why are you gay?
Who said that? Some nematodes infect the gasters of these ants, tinting them bright orange so birds mistake them for berries, using ants as living bait to reach new hosts. These fungus form tiny external growths on ants' bodies, spreading by contact during grooming, and the ants can recognize infected individuals and exclude them from grooming to stop disease spread. These ants' queen feed on their own larvae's hemolymph without harming them, a behavior called non-lethal cannibalism. At humans, this behavior is manifested by eating your own skin. Tawny crazy ant can neutralize fire ant venom by secreting its own detoxifying fluid. This is the first recorded chemical counterweapon between insect species. How long will it take for ants to build a nuclear bomb then? In the Amazon, there's a strange thing called the Devil's Garden. There, ants kill other plants using formic acid to protect their favorite tree, creating large open areas with only one kind of tree. Ants contribute to soil aeration and seed dispersal. In some ecosystems, up to 30% of all plant species rely on ants to distribute seeds. Did they plant more trees than Mr. Beast? These desert ants use path integration. They mentally summing distance and angle to return home perfectly. These ants can walk 100 meters in zigzags and return home in a straight line with less than 1% error. Fire ants and carpenter ants can live in water for a week and some up to 14 days. Queens can live over 30 years, making them some of the longest lived insects on Earth. Leptogenous ants hunt together in groups, similar to how wolves hunt. Honeypot ants use living workers as a food storage. Their abdomens fill with sweet liquid to feed the colony during dry times. They keep these ants hanging from ceiling like living food tanks, and they can hold up to 60 times their own body weight in sugar. Giant bull ant of Australia can leap several centimeters and has keen vision comparable to dragonflies, hunting by sight rather than smell. Also, their workers rely more on vision than pheromones, remembering visual landmarks like trees or rocks. These ants amputating injured legs to prevent infection. These species have lost the ability to secrete antimicrobials from their glands, but studies on other ant species such as matabel ants show them using antimicrobial secretion from a special gland to treat wounds. These ants conduct organized raids on termite colonies, then rescue wounded comrades, carrying them home for care and recovery. Wounded ants emit a pheromone cry for help. Medics carry them back and clean wounds with antimicrobial saliva. This medical care reduces mortality by 80% compared to untreated ants, a true example of organized battlefield triage. Leafcutter ants can excavate nests with near 2,000 chambers, with ventilation shafts and waste management tunnels that have complex airflow system rivaling human HVAC design. The patterns of airflow, temperature control and modular design in large nests are so advanced that engineers study them for biomimetic ventilation systems. That scientific word is for natural design that create passive cooling system. Atta leafcutters maintain elite soldiers' casts with armor-thick heads to crush invading ants or parasitoid flies. These ant-mound nests are thermoregulated by microbial composting, which generates heat for the brood during cold months. Eciton burchellii army ants have been observed taking down tarantulas and small frogs. When the raiders reach the host nest, they use an acid pore at the end of their abdomens to spray formic acid and the other chemicals. This spray causes panic and confusion among the host workers, triggering a flight response that allows the raiders to enter the nest with minimal resistance and steal the pupae. Ants are engaged in agriculture. Leafcutter ants don't eat leaves. They use them to cultivate a specialized fungus. That's their real food source. The symbiotic fungus they grow can only survive within the colony. Ants farmers can recognize up to 80 different leaf types by scent and touch, rejecting those that harm their fungus. The fungus itself emits warning volatile compounds if exposed to toxic leaves, and the ants learn to avoid those species. They even can detect changes in their fungal cultivar health days before visible symptoms appear. These ants are the only insects known to have domesticated another organism before humans did agriculture. This relationship is over 50 million years old, older than human agriculture by about 49.9 million years. And I was thinking, how do they get new fungus in new colonies? So apparently when new queen leaves her parent colony, she carries a small pellet of this fungus. She even have a specialized organ located near her mouth called the infrabuccal pocket, and this is a starter culture for the new colony's food source. After mating, queen lands chews off her wings and begins digging a small vertical burrow, usually 15 or 30 centimeters deep. The loss of her wings signifies the end of her life above the ground and the start of her subterranean reign. To survive for the next several weeks without foraging, the queen uses her now useless fight muscles, which are rich in protein and fat. She allows these muscles to disintegrate, a self-devour process, providing the energy and nutrients necessary for her metabolism and for producing her first clutch of eggs. Inside the chamber, the queen carefully spits the fungus. This becomes the founder garden. She fertilizes it with her own waste and saliva. Usually the queen lays 10 to 30 eggs, sometimes sacrificing a few of her own eggs to feed the growing fungus. After about 8 or 10 weeks, the first generation of tiny workers known as nanitics hatches. These workers immediately take over the critical task of caring for the fungus, relieving the queen of that duty. The queen's role is now strictly to lay eggs, so the next generations are workers. When they numerous enough, the largest of these workers break through the soil plug to the surface, becoming the first foragers who bring back fresh leaf fragments to feed the now rapidly expanding fungal garden. The winter ant is active at temperatures close to freezing, one of the only ants foraging in winter. While most ants are black, brown or red, a few species, such as the green-headed ant of Australia, because of course Australia, exhibit a striking metallic green or blue sheen. Male ants have a mother, but no father. Ants belong to this order, where females develop from fertilized eggs and males from unfertilized eggs, a system called haplodiploidy. Because of haplodiploidy, sisters share 75% of their genes, making them more closely related to each other than to their own offsprings. By the way, a key reason why social behavior evolved. Desert ants orient their nests so the entrance faces the sun at specific angles to stay cooler. These ants queen kill host queens with stealth and release pheromones that makes workers accept her. Ant brains can shrink and regrow depending on their role. Workers that became gamergates, that's a mated worker ant that can reproduce sexually, regrow brain tissue. Unfortunately, people only can shrink their brains. Some Australian ants can distribute eucalypt and acacia seeds after bushfires that jumpstart forest recovery. This ant uses its trap jaws not only for hunting, but to catapult itself backward from danger. Giant forest ants mix plant resin with their own acid to make a strong germ-killing layer at the nest entrance. This protects the colony from enemies and harmful germs. This ant's queen mates with multiple males and stores sperm separately, using it strategically depending on colony conditions. The so-called velvet ant is not an ant at all, but a hairy, wingless species of wasp. By the way, the females has one of the insect's world's most painful stings, earning it the nickname cow killer. Colonies can't remember past experiences. Thanathorax ants exposed to darkness during immigration later choose better lit nests, suggesting collective memory. Ants can detect magnetic fields using geomagnetic cues for orientation on the ground. Ants use compasses long before humans even invented them. Fire ants can live through floods by joining together into floating rafts that fix themselves when broke. Manamorium farionis uses chemical decoys. Workers release false alarm pheromones to confuse attackers. Lasius embratus parasites other Lasius species by mimicking queen pheromones and taking over nest peacefully. This is a parasitic ant with no workers at all. The queens infiltrate other colonies to reproduce, leaving host to raise their young. Sort of cuckoo bird in ants world. Campenotus schmidtsi can swim and dive, living inside Nepenthes pitcher plants and feeding on trapped insects. Argentine ants form super colonies stretching thousands of kilometers. One in Europe spans over 6,000 kilometers and it's considered one of the largest cooperative units ever recorded in nature. Fungus-growing ants harbor actinomycete bacteria on their exoskeletons that produce antibiotics against garden parasites. The ants and the bacteria have a mutually beneficial relationship. The ants provide the home for the bacteria, and the bacteria provide a critical defense for the ants' food source. They even used pesticides long before us. This ant rolls into a defensive ball when disturbed, one of the few ants that mimic pill bugs. Amazon ants queens must find a host colony immediately after mating or they die. They can survive without enslaved workers. This Amazon ant is a slave maker that raids other ant nests to steal larvae, which then grow up to serve their captors. These enslaved ants grow up thinking the raider's nest is their home, performing all labor for their captors. Some enslaved ants have evolved resistance to their master's pheromones, a case of co-evolutionary arms race. But sometimes slave revolt occur. These enslaved ants workers have been observed killing the parasite's brood from inside the nest. These ants raiders even brainwash enslaved ants through pheromonal manipulation. Some alpine ants can survive minus 30 degrees Celsius winters by producing antifreeze proteins that inhibit ice crystal formation in their tissues. Leafcutter refuse dumps have specialized waste workers that never re-enter clean chambers. Thamethorax albipenis performs colony-level democratic votes when relocating nests. If a better site is discovered mid-move, they can reverse their decision. The Lake Hodges colony and the Very Large colony are in a civil war right now. How this happened? This species of ant from Argentina was mostly brought to other continents by boats in the 1890s. Being very aggressive, they managed to conquer vast territories. The invading ants, all descendants from a small number of founders, were very similar genetically, so as they spread, the ants recognized each other as being from the same colony even though they were on different continents. One massive intercontinental mega colony now spans 6 continents, dominating ecosystems. Sometimes Argentine ants in their invasive ranges cooperate with other local colonies to form massive unified network, and genetic differences sometimes arise. When these differences become significant enough, the ants begin to recognize each rivals using their specific chemical signature, treating them as hostile invaders. And here where civil war started. Formica rufa can shoot formic acid from the abdomen 30 centimeters, one of the longest chemical weapon ranges in insects. Some ants leave their back ends high to scare enemies like a scorpion. Super colonies sometimes practice mutual tolerance zones, where neighboring nests share territory boundaries peacefully and emergent political order. ATA stridulation can coordinate cutting efficiency. A worker that vibrates more often inspires nearby workers to cut faster. Telutomyrmex schneideri queens have a hook-shaped legs for clinging permanently to host queens, where they eat food which was intended for the queen. When army ants moves, birds follow them to eat insects that flee. A bird ant team. Urban colonies grow larger than forest ones because concrete retain heat, extending breeding seasons. Crazy ants overwhelm large species by speed and chaos, biting in mass before enemies can aim. This is a bomber ant. It explodes its own body, releasing toxic glue that kills or immobilizes enemies. It's not really an explosion, they just sacrifice their body by rupturing a gland filled with sticky toxins to defend their nest. Just sacrifice, This ant feign death by dropping and remaining motionless when attacked, sort of a possum ant. Formica polyctina workers warm brood chambers by sunbasking and carrying heat inside, sort of a living heat pumps. Ants workers regulate brain activity by sleep microburst, lasting just seconds. That's help maintaining alertness in extreme heat. Ant species living in a floodplain build functional levees by surrounding their nest with high earthen walls. These structures are built within 24 hours of a major rain event. That's how local authorities need to work. And prevent flooding by diverting water away from the nest entrance. Myrmecina graminicola hibernates half the year, reducing metabolic rate by 90% without tissue damage. Ants don't have leaders. Every colony decision, migration defense, nest choice emerges from distributed consensus, a form of biological democracy. In army of this these ants, the rate of antennal contact between workers predicts whether the colony will relocate that day, a self-organized decision signal. If the path is efficient, they will maintain high contact rates. This indicates the current site is productive and the colony does not need to move. Low antennal contact location is unproductive. Some species can detect time of day cues, adjusting foraging behavior to temperature and light cycles, even in constant laboratory light, a built-in circadian rhythm. Some ant species, when attacking a rival colony, release a special propaganda pheromone that causes the enemy ants to panic and fight amongst themselves. That's destabilizing their defense. When paths are blocked, ants can discover shortest routes faster than many computer algorithms, inspiring the ant colony optimization systems used in network routing and logistics. Colonies possess an emergent immune memory. Exposure to pathogens leads to changes in colony behavior and microbial composition that persist for weeks. Queens can silence fertility in workers by emitting chemical pheromones that suppress ovary development, a form of molecular mind control. Leptothorax duloticus uses chemical mimicry to disguise itself as a host species before attacking. Ghost ant has a nearly transparent body, making it difficult for predators to spot. Polyrachis dive soldiers interlock to form defensive walls at nest entrances, sort of a shield formation in Roman legions. Some ants bury dead ones under soil or resign, like ant funerals. The Asian weaver ant has been recorded holding weights of over 100 times its body mass, particularly while hanging upside down on a smooth surface, utilizing its specialized sticky footpads. Bull ants are strong hunters that sting insects and even small animals. Odontomachus chop jaw kill prey in under a millisecond. The impact can throw the prey backward before the mandibles reopen. Formica rufa can merge two colonies temporarily if the queens are sisters. They tolerate each other until competition forces one out. Lasius flavus builds elaborate cow pens for root aphids, providing protection in exchange for food. These root aphids are sometimes carried by queens during mating flights, ensure livestock continuity in new colonies. These caterpillars are social parasites of Myrmica ants. They are first adopted by ants, often using chemical mimicry. Once inside the nest, they produce sounds that closely mimic the distant calls of an ant queen. This queen mimicry elevates their social status, causing the worker ants to care for them with the same intense protection and attention normally reserved for the queen, even prioritizing them over their own ant larvae during hard times. After major battles, scavenger ants often recycle the dead by recycling of fallen soldiers. Some species also engage in necrophagy. While the primary function is sanitation, consuming their bodies, recycle the dead ants' nitrogen and other nutrients back into the colony's food web. Some Phaidal ants send shorthand alarm signals that trigger specific defense responses, like activating soldiers only. These ants have perhaps the most entertaining defense against rainwater. They build their nest in bamboo twigs that are prone to flooding during heavy rain. At the first sign of flooding, workers run inside the nest and drink as much of the encroaching water as they can. Then they proceed outside en masse and collectively urinate, a process fittingly dubbed communal peeing. These colonies use conflict resolution rituals. Two contesting ants face each other and engage in rapid, repeating tapping and stroking with their antennae. These interactions are a form of chemical and tactile assessments. The worker that loses the fight, usually by retreating, is often chemically suppressed by the winner, which affects her ovarian development and solidifies the dominance hierarchy without physical injury or death. This allows the colony to maintain a peaceful, efficient division of reproductive labor. Weaver ants use larval silk as a construction glue, demonstrating one of the most advanced examples of cooperative tool use in insects. Amazon ants are so specialized for slavery that their workers cannot feed themselves.